hot, 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 hot. Okay, plan for tomorrow. I made a huge deck of slides that hopefully will try to cover everything that we discussed that is in the material for the midterm, starting at quad trees and goes all the way to segment tree. But in a few, that was one of the questions in the homework and appeared so many times in the course. So what are we doing here? We are picking x that is some random number, or I could have just picked a set of numbers and pick a permutation, exactly the same behavior, pick a set of numbers and pick a random permutation, or pick a new random number at each iteration. And if it's larger than the maximum you have seen so far, then you are updating the maximum seen so far and updating count. And we ask in homework 6, what is the expected value of the counter? And for this, we defined Boolean values, yi equals 1, if and only if m was updated at stage I. Just to go over it really quickly, if yi is a random variable, it's either on or off, depending if I updated the maximum at the I step. If the ith number that I picked is larger than everybody that I picked beforehand. And even though we use the very same argument in the linear programming description, and we use the same argument in the BSP tree, and we use the same argument in the trapezoidal map, what lies behind it still needs a bit smoothing to sit nicely with everybody. So the argument that we used multiple times in this course was that assuming that I picked x1 and x2, and I ask what is the probability that x2 is larger than x1, out of symmetry, the probability that x2 is larger than x1 is exactly the probability that x1 is larger than x2. There is nothing about the permutation, so the probability that x2, that the Boolean variable, y2, probability that y2 is 1, that is that x2, that the maximum was updated at the second step, which is that the maximum out of the two elements is the second one. This probability is, of course, half. Now, the same argument, if I picked three numbers, x3, what's the probability out of the 3? There is a maximum. Out of the 3, there is a maximum. What is the probability that the maximum appears as the last element out of symmetry? same probability that it appears as a mid element or as a first element. All permutations are equally likely, so probability that y3 is 1 is therefore, what's the chances? Either the maximum is here, or is here, or is here, all equally likely. So it's 1 over 3, dot dot probability that yi is 1 is 1 over I, and the expected now value of the counter. Expected value of the counter, we went through this gymnastics so many times. What happens to the counter? Every time that yi is 1, the counter goes up by 1. If yi is 0, that is it. I didn't update the maximum, then the counter at the I step does not change. So the counter is just y1 plus y2 plus dot dot yn. The expected value of the counter is the expected value of sigma of the yi, which is, as we saw with any time that we see Boolean variable, Boolean random variable, what is the sum, the expected of the sum is the sum of the expectation. That is, that sigma of the expected value of yi, the expected value of yi is just sigma the probability that yi is 1, which is sigma of 1 over I. And this type of argument is just explaining so many things in the course. OK. So just to go through this gymnastic once again, other thing in homework 6, I asked a stupid question. I asked how to build a BSP for a set of segments. Either always a BSP that will give us a size which is subquadratic for segments in the plane. And the answer that I expected, of course, was no, because otherwise the algorithm that find the BSP there will be cases that the algorithm fails. The algorithm claims that it can generate n log n fragments, and here's an example. Well, I forgot to write in the question that the segments needs to be disjoint, so if you wrote that this is the answer, then of course you are legally you are correct about it, that the way any BSP here will create n square fragments. So before the midterm, ask again the question. I'll put it in the review. That either always a BSP that gives subquadratic, like n log n number of fragments, if the segments are disjoint, of course. That was on me, this mistake. OK, we can play with various questions. We can play with going over the slides that I put all of them. I changed the order, so maybe at least at the beginning we'll go over them, and you'll stop me. Yeah, you'll stop me if you want me to go deeper. Otherwise, I'll go quite fast. And before all of it, questions about anything? Yes, there are already a couple of them. One that I think that is quite important, either in questions 6 or 7, there are a few practical questions, practice questions, sorry. And I'll add more and more as I'll think about it. Like I'll add that solve this one, but solve question 6.1, but when the segments are disjoint, which I forgot to ask. But yeah, I'll add more, and we can maybe chat more about some of the questions. Here's a cute question, actually, from that I already had in the review, but let's play with this a bit. So the question in the review was, you're given a set of points, P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, and so on, as usual. And I'll give you a query range. After pre-processing, I'll give you a query range. And I want to ask what are the points that lies inside the query range. And we studied many data structures that can answer this question. I think that almost all of them, besides BSP, will know to answer this question. By the way, somebody told me in the answer that you cannot use R-tree for points. It's not accurate. I didn't describe it for points, but the beauty is that you can build you can build R-tree for anything, any geometric shapes, and they don't have to all be of the same type, including points. Anyway, so I want to know, for example, how many points lies in Q, and if I want some guarantees about the running time of the query, I can use KD3, which will give me square root of n. And why would I use KD3 with square root of n? Because the space is linear, and the preprocessing is only n log n. Linear space, important. But if I am willing to spend a bit more space, n log n space, then you can use range tree. And range tree will answer how many points there are here in log square n. So far, you know it. But the memory will be n log n memory. That you all know. The version in the homework was that every point comes with some weight, wi. So that would be wi, that would be w3, w2. Each one comes with a weight, and I want to know what is a point with a maximum weight. Just a little trick in the data structure. So in the same query time, I want to know what is the heaviest point in this range. Preprocessing is the same, except that the input is, of course, a set of points plus the weight that they're coming with. And the weight has nothing to do with the location of the point. Just a number that I added for it. It usually comes with the application. And then I want to find the heaviest point in the range. So once I'm bringing my monster, you guys talk to your neighbors about it, and also talk about the version where I want to either increase the weight of a point. And increasing the weight of a point should be done in polylogarithmic time. Polylogarithmic means n or log n or log square n or something like this. Increase the weight of the point, that's slightly easier, or decrease the weight of a point that is slightly harder. Both are easy, but one is slightly harder than the other. So have discussion and we'll talk about it. Speak up. Slightly overkilling. You can, of course, add the W as a Z coordinate, but then the range is now, I can, but now I need to ask, what is a query exactly? You're still getting from the 3D bunch of points, and you want to target some values of these at somehow a point. What is the first point that a point vanishes? It's doable, and in some other data structure, it's actually quite useful. But not here. Here it will be an overkilling. As simple as that. We have a bunch of trees, and the trees has trees of their own. Remember, it's two-dimensional data structure. But every node in one of my trees, no matter if it's the first level or the second level, this node U stores max WI, where, or W, let's write it as max of the weight of PI, where PI is any point stored at U's subtree. Yeah, not everything needs to be complicated. So U just knows what is the heaviest point in its own subtree, and then if I ever need to visit U, we saw the example where I need to report a counter at U. Here I just report what is U itself stores what is its heaviest weight. It doesn't mean that we'll use necessarily the point from U, but you remember altogether how many canonical subsets are we visit. We're visiting log square n many canonical subsets, so for each one of them the maximum is known. And if I'll increase, if I have a point P over here, PI over here, and W of PI it was increased by 1, I increment the weight of WPI, I just go up and update the weight of WPI all the way to the root, unless I find somebody with heavier weight, and then I don't update the weight. But everybody that says the weight of the maxi, if V over here says the maximum in my subtree is PI, and it used to be whatever weight it used to be before, then making it larger, of course, doesn't matter. What about the changing the weight to minus minus? Still in logarithmic time. So I have the values x1, x2, all the way up to xn, and the x3 has the weight of x3 is 17. I just inserted x3 or changed its weight or something, and I want to change, because I change the weight of x3 to something, it might affect the weight of its own, or the weight of its parent, the weight of its grandparent, grandparent, and so on, all the weight to the root. It might that the weight of all of them have decreased. But how do I know if the new weight should be, if the weight of it was 17 and now the weight is 13? Help? In logarithmic, in log n in the 1D case. How do I update the weight? So for every node u needs to know what is max of weight of max u would be the maximum value of any point in u's subtree. As before.
So couldn't you just go to the parent, and if that one changes, then check the children? And
if the parent has changed, yeah, if the parent was not changed, look at, let's look at x over here. Let's look at x over here. If its weight was larger than 17, then of course x3 has nothing to do with the weight of x and nothing to do. If the weight of it was 17, it might decrease, but possibly it shouldn't be decreased all the way to 13. How could it be? Because it has another child. So I'm checking what the weight of the other child, and that's it. That's the only trick. Right, so it's still log n. Now, I'll give you a few questions to practice that uses this idea to do things like finding monotone sequences, which is a really important data structure. We actually used it for some privacy attacks, but one of the many applications. I give you a set of points, and I want to ask, among all the points, find the longest sequence that only goes to the right and up. That would be a monotone subsequence, and I want to find the longest one. So with such tricks, you can find it in about order of n log square n. How would you do it? You'll access the point in some clever way, but when you access the point of pi, when pi is one of the points that you're going to access, what you want to ask is what pi might be part of one of the monotone subsequence of all the many points that you see out here. How do I know what is the longest subsequence that I'll find that pi would be could be added? Where are all the points that participates or comes before pi in every such monotone subsequence? They needs to be to the left and below pi. So if every point pj, pk, pr, if every point pr at this point knows what is the longest subsequence that ends at each one of these points, then pi can ask, hey, out of all these many points over here, can you tell me who is the one that ends with a maximum subsequence? Let's say that there is one that ends with a subsequence of length 17. There is already a subsequence of length 17. Then pi can join to this subsequence, and now the weight of pi would be 17 plus myself, plus 1. So in this way, and as long as I'm accessing the points from left to right and in topological order, then I'm sure that when a point pi needs to be accessed, that everybody to below and to the left already knows what is their own weight. Their weight is not going to change. They are not going to discover that they are on longer subsequence, all at the beginning. So that's a very practical algorithm. Okay, let's go over the slides, and they are not in the chronological order. Deliberately, I try to break it in a more coherent way. Duality, played a lot with duality between points and lines. Very amusing. What points are on a line if a line is on the point, above and below are the same. What segments are becoming after duality. We mentioned that various things happen with duality, like envelopes, that suddenly you want to compute linear programming, and for linear programming 2D, you want to compute the intersection of half planes. Then you can take their dual and take the points that are above all the lines and make a set of points out of them and compute their convex hull. Actually, all you need is the lower part of the convex hull. Similarly, half planes that are pointing downward, you just need their lower envelope, so take and compute their convex hull, and vice versa. There are many games that I can ask or have asked about it, including in the midterm and in the homework right after it. That is, so convince yourself about what is that. At this point, you need to name 3 algorithms that solve the following problem. I'll give you a set of half planes. I'll give you a set of half planes. If I sorted them by order, you need to do it in linear time. Well, not in all 3 algorithms. But in any case, you need to do it in, oh, and I forgot motion planning. Jesus, in the summation, I completely forgot the motion planning. Sorry. I knew that it's. So you need to do everything in order of n log n, and you need at least 3 algorithms to compute the intersection of all these half planes. So 3 algorithms, 2 from the beginning of the course. Divide and conquer was 1. And the second one says take all the half planes and look at their dual. And then you have the gram scan as another algorithm, or divide and conquer for the convex hull as well. And actually, you had another algorithm that said sort them by increasing slope and then insert them in the right order. And when you insert them in the right order, I don't think that we talked about this question in details. So I'll store all the segments or all the vertices that I had so far in all these half planes, and I'm inserting them in an increasing order. So the increasing slope, that is, so the next half plane will hit this lower envelope only at a single point. Must intersect in exactly in single point. Right? As opposed to heads, had the order be arbitrary, then it might meet it in 2 different points. But the slope of the next one is larger than the slope of the last line. So there will be only 1 intersection point, and then what was the trick to solve this question? The trick was I know that there is the Li plus 1, the one that I'm just adding, will create some intersection points, and maybe I'll spend a lot of time finding this intersection point, but it's important that I'll first check the first segment. And the first segment actually has a vertex that goes, or a vertex at infinity. It's actually a ray, doesn't matter. I'll check the first segment if it intersects Li plus 1. If it doesn't, which happens if this vertex Vi is to the right of Li plus 1, I'll check, then I can delete this line from any future consideration. And I'll check Vi minus 2, that is this segment, and if it doesn't intersect, then I'll check this segment, and finally I'll check this segment to discover the new vertices. So possibly I spend a lot of time but all this lot of time are charged to lines that are not going to participate anymore in the game. You can see it directly here, or you can ask what does it entitle to. It's another good practice question. Run this algorithm, but in the dual plane. The lines will appear sorted, then you'll have a set of points that will appear sorted. And what are you computing in the dual plane? You will have the set of lines, set of points that you considered so far. So maybe we'll draw them as green, because these are greens. And they create a part of a convex hull. And now I'm adding Li plus 1 star, the dual of Li plus 1, and I need to update the convex hull. And how do I do it? I consider the last point, left turn, right turn, maybe I'll delete it, maybe I'll delete it, until I'll finally find somebody. So it's exactly the same algorithm, just that's in the primal, that's in the dual. Okay.
Wait, so this will be O of n log n?
If they are given when the order is given, if they are given when the slope is sorted, then it's linear. A full answer would be, if I'll give you just a set of half planes when the slope is sorted, then you'll separate them into the upper half plane, lower half plane, the one that contains infinity and minus infinity, and for the other ones, you're just playing the same trick. And this creates an upper envelope, which is convex, lower envelope that is convex, and you all know how to scan these two strips. You're doing a line strip, essentially, but it's a line strip only with one polygonal chain and another polygonal chain, and they are both Y monotone. So this line strip actually has only two intersection points, two crossing events, and all the other events are vertices of the original polygon. Yeah?
So if you're given the segments in order of slope, is it expected linear time or is it just linear time?
Linear time, worst case.
Because like, isn't it you're going through all the points and then for each one to find the intersection with the current one, it's log n? Or
No, I avoid all. I am doing very stupid search. I'm doing a search by checking every segment at all. I'm holding myself from the uncontrollable reflex of binary search among convex things. I'll check every segment in itself. Kind of similar to the way that we built arrangement incrementally in actually this next slide, building arrangement and the zone theorem. The only trick is that a segment that is being checked will not be checked again. It belongs to a line that is excluded from further consideration. For all the segments that I'm checking, excluding the one that has a vertex on it, that's the only one that stays for the next line. Yeah, okay. That's all new materials, and it was not on the slides, especially warning Zoom people and people that will get us recorded, that we had the duality between points and arrangements of all these points. That is, takes the points and makes them, you start from points, look at their dual, and we know that we can build the arrangement incrementally, just add the lines at any order you want. Arbitrary doesn't mean random. It's not, it's any order you want, add the lines one after the other, and you have already an arrangement of several lines. You're adding one more line. My advisor had a theorem that said that in any drawing on the whiteboard of more than 5 lines, you'll always have 3 lines that intersect at a point. I think that it's quite accurate. But so you're adding one more. line, and you are finding for the very leftmost point. It was a joke, by the way. Don't quote me. Look at, but it's all, yeah. Look at the leftmost point, some point very, very much to the left. You identify that it lives inside a face of the arrangement. Check all the edges of the arrangement to see where this line exits from this face and going to the next face. Similarly, check all the vertices, goes to the next face, next face, next face. And so on, you track this line and you add it to the arrangement. And why does it all work? That was for very cool but deep combinatorial reasons. We proved the zone theorem. The zone theorem said that whatever this new line sees, meaning all the vertices, edges, faces, of course, but faces there is only n old faces, but obviously it crosses n segments, but it sees a lot of other vertices. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch the recording. It sees, for example, this vertex, and it actually sees it again from here. Never mind. All the summation of all these things is only linear. Why? Because when we write down the lines that are seen by the red lines, again, I write down all the lines that the red line sees in the order that they appeared along the faces. This picture is probably way too messy. I have my red line that is just being inserted, and it visits a face, and another face, and another face, and another face. And for every such face, I had to check every line, every edge that defines such a face. And some of these lines were checked multiple times. It's possible that one line is checked in each one of the faces that the red one sees. And it could be that one of these faces has huge complexity. Every line participates in this face. But it cannot be that a lot of the faces has large complexity, to be precise. The total sum of edges in each one of these faces is only order n. And why? Because when we walked along these faces and write down, hey, I just now see I now see L17. Now I see L3, I see L17 again, see another line. That was a Davenport-Schinzel, which means that you don't have A, B, A, B in this part, and we proved it. And in such a sequence, the number of times that a line can be written, summed up for all the lines, is only 2n minus 1. And that was for everything that happens above the red line, and we argue the same argument for everything below the red line. So that was the zone theorems, and two immediate applications were computing the visibility graph, and computing, it was a cute little puzzle, compute the smallest area triangle. I have a set of points. Think about all the n-cubed triangles whose vertices are this input set of points. Find for me the triangle with the smallest area. You notice that because of the zone theorems and a bit high school geometry, you can do it in n squared time. We had the motion planning that I don't have on these slides, but remember that actually one of the practice questions that I had for you in the homework 6 or 7 is to use DS sequences to argue that if you have objects which are pseudodisks, then every face has a small complexity. And by the way, having small complexity, if I can tell you that the free space of a robot, well, the overall free space of my robot can be large, but if my robot starts here, it can only get to places in its own free space. So if I'll tell you that this free space has linear complexity, it means I can also compute it in n log n. That's argument that we saw again and again. If I have union of squares and I want to compute, I have squares and I want to compute their union, or pseudo disks that are polynomials. Compute their union. The moment that you know that altogether you have only order n vertices that are of interest, then you can do divide and conquer. And now when you're doing line sweep to merge two larger phase to get what is your phase exactly, the number of events that you are handling are either vertices that are going to vanish, and you don't care about them because they are going to vanish, or new vertices, but every new vertex will be one of the vertices that you charge in this argument, or you charged when we computed the union of squares. How fast can I compute the union of n squares? Well, one of the algorithms says, let's ask how many vertices there are on the unions. Well, only order n. Why? Because if it's all squares of the same size, it's true even if they are not of the same size, but if it's all of the same size, then I can ask this vertex, hey, you'll charge somebody. You'll charge this vertex, so you have somebody to charge. So that's a number of new vertices that are created. And now if I have the set of these n squares and these n squares, but all I cared is the union of the blacks that are already computed, the union of the reds that are already computed, do a line sweep to compute their common union and count how many events. There will only be linear number of events when you do the merge. N half from all the events from the red, and half from all the events of the black, and n new events that are exactly the vertices of the intersection of the new guy. Okay, we had a lot of trees, some with different applications. Quad trees, the other, we talked about quad trees for images, quad trees for points. Points might be here are given on a grid of size 2 to the m times 2 to the h times 2 to the h. At later steps, we used similar quad tree, but for points, sorry, did I say something else? Quad tree for points, but we said the points might have real coordinates. Points might have real coordinates, so the height of the quad tree is unbounded. So I'll say that they have real coordinates, but the spread is a constant, for example. If the spread is a constant, spread is distance between smallest distance to the largest distance, then the height of the tree will be what? The highest distance between any pair of points, half of the highest distance between any points, half. After log n many steps, log of the spread to be precise, you are doomed to separate the closest pair, because now the size of this cell is smaller than the smallest distance. You started when the quad tree covers the two most remote points, and after constant many steps, if the spread is constant, every cell has a size that is smaller than the smallest pair. That's what constant spread means. If the spread is polynomial, then the constant height will be replaced by log of the height. But same argument. Sorry, then this, what did I say? If the spread is polynomial, the spread, which is the max of p minus q divided by mean of p minus q for any 2 points, p and q, in my data, then if the spread is n is small or equal than n to the power c, then after log many steps of the quad tree, to answer one of the questions of homework 7, after log n many steps, every cell will be smaller than the minimum. Okay. What else did we store? We studied a general method to report objects in any of the trees, essentially. It was here it for quad tree, but it essentially said that we like 3 scenarios. We have a query region. If the query region is disjoint from the region of a node, then they have nothing to do together, leave them alone. If the region of the node is fully inside the query region, then every point in the subtree of V is relevant for the query. If you report them or report the maximum, like in the puzzle earlier, or just need to report each individual point, it's the same. And mostly, if neither of these cases happens, then you're hoping at least that R of V that V is a leaf, and then it has a single data item that you need to check individually, is this inside the disk or not. But if V is not a leaf, then you just check each one of its children and run it recursively. And that's true for all the trees that we've seen. Okay, but the only tree that we actually had bound on the running time was in the KD tree. Okay, triangles, we have to do it in 4 triangles. We mentioned that we want to do it also as a way to triangulate the whole shape, and good triangulation, hopefully. Small triangles, or sorry, not necessarily small triangles, but each one should touch the boundary only at 2 or 3 vertices, but not to contain a big chunk of the boundary. And we studied how to do it, and the main trick was that if I have a quadrant that contains something very simple inside it, then like in this quadrant, I can take its diagonal, and it breaks my world into 2 triangles that are as nice as it can be. For 90, 45, 45 is very nice and friendly triangle. And or use the middle of the square and define the triangle otherwise. It's essentially we wanted to say that next to the data, next to the boundary, maybe there are fast changes, so we need a lot of small triangles. Far away from the boundary of the object, we can use larger triangles. How did I build this quad tree is not too important. It's very application related. What was more important here was that I want to be able for every quadrant to know that there is 1 or 2 neighbors from the side. It might influence from on the right side, either there is 1 quadrant or 2 quadrants. But if I want to do, say, ray tracing in graphics, I want to say a ray that just leaves this quadrant is going to one of the neighboring quadrants over here. I want to be able to check to each quadrant it enters without more data structures, which would mean to check if this quadrant has only 1 neighbor on the left, I'm happy. If it has 2 neighbors on the left, tolerable. I'll check either this one or this one. More neighbors from the left is, we don't like it for various reasons. So the answer was used balance quad tree. And balanced quad tree don't confuse with compressed quad tree. Balanced quad tree said the size of every quadrant is different from its neighbors by factor of at most 2. That is, either they are of this and this are either of the same size, and this are different by size of 2. The edge length of this is twice the edge length of this. But I'm very annoyed that this huge quadrant has so many neighbors on the right side. So what would be the solution? I'll have to subdivide this quadrant into 4, and some of its neighbors have to subdivide into more quadrants, and so on. A very greedy algorithm that just says, always check your neighbors. If you need to check, to split. And here are the result of a balanced quad tree. Everybody is good with the definition? And we had a theorem that with a lot of hand waving, we said that every new quadrant must have an old quadrant next to it, which means that every old quadrant will be charged for at most 8 new quadrants. So the number of new quadrants that I'll generate is proportional to the number of old quadrants that I had. If I started from 1,000 nodes quad tree, I'll end up with at most 8 times 1,000, 8 times whatever was my 8 times whatever was my old quadrant. In other words, that with relatively small price, I can assume that all my quad trees are very nice to do this way-shooting and influencing and build triangles, because it's also important for triangulation. I don't want that one triangle will be next to, don't want that one of my triangle in my triangulation, that this guy will be neighbors to many tiny triangles on this side, right angle or not. That's very bad in influence, because if I hit this triangle, I have no clue what it does to this such enormous triangle that is well. So what would be the impact of this balancing quad tree with respect to triangulation? It would mean that if this triangle was generated by take a quadrant and split it by the diagonal, then what you are splitting on the right-hand side is 2 triangles, which are at most half its size. So this guy will find at most 2 triangles that are touching it from this size. And the same goes for every edge of any triangle that you'll generate. Possibly only 1 triangle. OK, that's about compressed. We mentioned a bit that quad tree, any one of the trees can be also be described as a way to compress your data. You're just saying, if all my data, all my set of points in this range are all behaving kind of linearly, I can fit them by a line or by a triangle with very little error about their height, then let's just ignore using this data point at all and just remember that at this region, it is only 1 line. So every time that you'll ask me what the height is, I'll just tell you, use this line that is stored in the node. But that's only if the data over here fits 1 line. Here I have a moderate and pretty uniform mountain, while here, if I'm looking at the height, I have 1 piece of a mountain that changed to another piece of a mountain. And I cannot fit all of them with 1 nice line, so I'll just split and store 2 separate lines. It's a bit confusing when we think about them as lines. It makes more sense when we think about it as a way to triangulate terrain. Right? That I'll say if all the elevation points inside the triangle, I can all hit them with 1 huge triangles. All the elevation points are close enough to one big triangle, then I don't see any reasons to further subdivide it into sub-triangle. On the other hand, if inside 1 big triangle I see some points in sea level and some point high on the mountain, then probably I should not try to match them all with a single triangle, and I need to further split it. OK. Compressed quad tree, we had a lemma that, please remember, the proof is not complicated. I might ask about it. I sometimes call it families with many children. If you have a tree where every internal node has at least 2 children, then the number of internal nodes is not more than the number of children. Where are we using it? That if we have a compressed quad tree, that is, we don't like that we have a sequence of nodes, each one has only 1 child. We place them all by 1 meta node at the bottom. You saved a lot of information. Can I quantify it? Yes, I'm sure that I'll be left with n leaves, where n is a data point that I have. I'll be left with n leaves, and the number of internal nodes, well, since now I get rid of every internal node with single child, I'm left with internal node that has 2 or more children. So the number of internal nodes is not more than the number of leaves, that is not more than the number of data points. Long sentence. Okay, more about the compressed quad trees. R trees, very general, not much theory, just remember that you want to pair the objects in a good way. For example, close to each other would be a good way. You had a question in the homework that asked if you're taking 2 segments very far away, then if I'll do point location and I hit the bounding box, or I can hit the bounding box of many pairs of segments without hitting any of the segments at all. Well, if my quad tree looks kind of reasonable, like in this form where I'm matching segments that are very close to each other, somehow they are, if a point location is doomed to boil down to few bounding boxes quickly. But again, we didn't have any theoretical proof about R3. Besides that, the height of an R3 is log n. That's obvious. Just so it's practical, very, very practical data structure. Reporting in R3, reporting all segments that intersect is the same deal. Like in quad tree, there is a good motivation to take R3s where every node contains many more than just 2 children, like 100. Why? Because then the tree as a whole will have much higher height, much smaller height. The CPU operation of searching anything in the tree will be higher, but the number of times that you need to access, to bring nodes from the memory will be much smaller, just the height of the tree. So that's why R tree or B trees that you might have heard about in, if you took database course, I hope that you heard about B trees or in data structures. So you know why B trees are good for data. Is new to anybody, or you have heard? Anyhow, yeah.
What would the space complexity be for R trees?
Linear. Yeah, it's because let's go back. What do I have here? In our favorite formula, I have the, I mean, even in the binary case of binary tree, n plus n half, many nodes, 1 level above, plus n over 4, n over 8, n over 16. So it's n times 1 plus half plus 1 over 2 plus, so it's. So this is just 2. And that's an upper bound. What was mentioning, I don't have a slide for it now, that what you are a lot of time doing in graphics application of the quad tree is that you are actually storing not necessarily, it's not in the material, just trivia, but important trivia. In graphics application, you can store the data in very fine details, and you can store the quad tree approximation of it, and then a quad tree approximation of the approximation, a quad tree approximation of the approximation, and you have the whole deal of level of details. And it's kind of similar because you're saying the quad tree in its finest details will take n time. The quad tree with much fewer details will take less of half of the memory. Smaller will be quarter of the memory, and so on. Now, why is this a good thing? Because when I render the whole image, I'll decide about this picture. I'll decide about where the user is, how the player in this computer game, and if the player is far, far away, then to render it quickly, I can use a much more careless data structure, much less refined, that has much fewer items because the visual error is small enough that it will not be wrong. If I'm just standing next to the mountain, then I need very fine details. So there is a good reasons to keep all the levels at the same time, and as the player moves interactively, I'll decide which one of them to use. Okay, KD tree, talked about it long time. Splitting in the median, and don't forget the proof why it goes to why the search time is square root n. It was nice, and KD trees are much more popular than range trees because it's linear space. And there are a lot of things you can do in KD tree, like look for the nearest element for a query point. It will not be optimal, but you can also do it. Essentially, if you have a query point, you'll see at which cell am I and what the points that are in my cell, and also what my distance to every other cell. Because every cell that are neighboring a query point, maybe it has a point that is suspicious as a nearest neighbor. You want to find the point that is the closest to a query point. So I'll keep the distance for me to some of the cell and some of the points, and at each moment I'll just check a new cell. Hey, is this cell might contain the point that is the actual nearest neighbor to my query? When can I stop this process? The moment that I have one data point that I already know the distance, and the distance to this query point is larger than the distance from the query point to any other cell. If every other cell of the tree is larger than the distance of one data point that I have in mind, then there is no point of exploring this cell, nor its neighbors, because, well, any point inside it will be more remote than what I already have in mind. It was very hand-wavy, but it's a very practical way to use KD trees or quad trees to find nearest neighbors. Okay, just range counting and why it's square root n. We've gone through it multiple times. And the square root n once again. Higher dimension, just split among the x, among the y, among the z, among the x, y, z, and so on. I had a question about, in the homework, is it important to split by x and by y? The answer is absolutely yes, because otherwise, if all my points are along an x, then my quad tree, all my region will be over here. And now if I ask for a query that might cross all these cells, you need to spend linear time to check all these cells just to discover that maybe none of the points is inside the query region. So you do earn a lot by alternating x, y, z, x, y, z. Range trees, the ones that we just discussed, first by x, then by first by x, build subtrees, then by y. We discussed them today. No need to call them again. Just to warn you again that the terminology is horrendous. That all the trees have ranges with them, but that's only 2D range tree or k-dimensional range tree. But at least the query time is really nice, log square n altogether. Why log square n? Because you are in the main tree, you are visiting log n subtrees, log n canonical subset, and each one of them you're performing one more search, so it log square n. Segment tree, what we just very recently discussed. Segment tree, you have a set of rectangles you want to project them, and build a segment tree on them. Tell me if you want me to go over it. You are defining elementary intervals, basically by taking all the endpoints and sort them, put them in a tree, and now start merging them. This part is just like in an R tree, how you're merging intervals. But now I have a set of segments that are stored at a node. What's so important about this node with respect to these segments, the interval that this node corresponds to, this interval is contained in these segments. But I'd prefer that my parents will do the hard job for me. The intervals that this node corresponds to is contained inside these segments, but the interval of the parent is not inside S5 nor inside S2, so they are not stored over here. So we had this rule Si is stored inside the set of nodes of V if Si contains the interval of V, but Si does not contain the interval of the parent of V. Right. And you see an example over here that S1 is stored at this leaf because it covers it. S1 is also stored at this leaf and will also be stored at this leaf over here, but at every level. A segment will be stored at the same level only in 2 nodes, not in 3. Why? Because if it's stored in 2 right nodes or 2 left nodes, then they must have a common ancestor. And once they have common ancestor, then if it's stored this node and this node, then it also covers the common ancestor of these 2 nodes. So the overall memory is log square is, a node is n log n. Every node will be in log n. And in 2 dimension, it will just be log square n. You can do similar thing in log square n. I didn't show you these slides. Let's project everything. Let's ask who are the segments that covers a window. I want to ask, out of a set of segments that are not intersecting, who are the ones that covers the window? So I first project them, build a segment tree on them, ask for the segment tree, hey, here is the X and Y slabs of my window. Who are the segments that I'm sure that covers this slab? And the segment tree will tell you each one of these segments go all the way from left to right. And they don't intersect, so I can sort them inside the slab from bottom to top, which now if you give me another the X and Y value of the window, I can report all the segments that are relevant here by finding the lowermost one and then go 1 up, 1 up, 1 up. So that's how you're answering window. What did we discuss about a nearest neighbor? We said Voronoi diagram in higher dimension is not practical. General 3 dimension is the only dimension that is semi-practical. Maybe higher dimension you are lost, so used approximated Voronoi diagram, which is partition of the plane, like Voronoi diagram, into regions, so that every region has a nearest neighbor, except that the number of cells that I'll end up will be close to linear versus exponential. And the nearest neighbor, I might lie a bit about it, about who is the nearest neighbor, where as long as my lie is not by more than epsilon. So I hope that you managed to raise a question in homework 7 that I asked to move a ball from one place to another place, but this happens in 3D, not in 2D. I ask, is there a path from here to here? You have a set of points. Is there a path from the ball from here to here, such that you can move the ball without hitting any of the obstacles? It is a free space. And the way that we solved it in 2 dimensions was build the Voronoi diagram and say it's OK to move the ball on Delanoy edges. Because if I have a Voronoi edge, then if I have 2 obstacles, and there is any way for me to move between these obstacles, I'll just move when I'm equidistant from these 2 obstacles. I don't want to be close neither to this one or to this one, so I'll move just in the middle. What will I do in case of the ball in 3D? Well, I don't have exactly the exact Voronoi diagram, but I can use the moving among the cell of the approximated Voronoi diagram. And the approximated Voronoi diagram, we'll go back to this slide and probably call it a day. And the approximated Voronoi diagram, after all these squares, has only a size of number of all the intersection ball or the size of the Voronoi diagram. Number of cells is only n times something that we can consider constant. So to the epsilon, epsilon is the size of the ball that you're doing. So you're moving so that you're between two neighbors at each time, but if you're just having a bit mistake about the distance to the neighbors, the algorithm is still okay with telling you. The algorithm asks you if the ball is much larger than the values that I give you, then you must say there is no way to move the ball. If the ball is much smaller, the algorithm must say, I'm sure that there is a way to move the ball. And if the algorithm is about around the bottleneck of the distance that I can move it or not move it, then the algorithm can say yes or can say no. We don't hold the algorithm in, we don't blame the algorithm in this case if it says it's wrong, but it's there is no way to move the ball, but if you'll just do it slightly smaller, there is a way to move the ball. The algorithm doesn't need to be sensitive. It just needs to be sensitive between much larger or much smaller. And the answer is just move along the approximated Voronoi diagram. Now, on the way to talk about the approximated Voronoi diagram, we discovered a few cool things. We discovered locality-sensitive hashing. That is not really in the material, but is very, very practical. Just project all the points on a line or on a few lines and put them in shapes. Use hashing along the way. We talked about putting the points on a grid when a lot of the points might be in one grid cell. How would they do it? Just put a hash table, but only stored the points or the cells that are non-empty. Only store cells that are non-empty. And how do I know at which cell should I store a point? I'll apply this little transformation that gives me two indices. If the size here is epsilon, 2 epsilon, 3 epsilon, 4 epsilon. If the x value is between 5 epsilon and 6 epsilon, then I'll know that it belongs to this column, similarly to this row. So I'll take the x value divided by epsilon, the y value divided by epsilon, and look at the round value of both of them. These are two integers that are uniquely specified at which cell it is, so I can hash them. And how large is my hash table? Only as large as the number of non-empty cells. Even though in the grid you see billions of cells, only the non-empty cells, that is the number of data points, are relevant. And we discussed the idea of growing disks, where they are growing in size of 1 plus epsilon. Start from the smallest distance that you want and grow them by 1 plus epsilon. And by the way, if you are creating the arrangement of all these disks, then it answers another of the homework question. Ask, how do I know that here is a cell such that every point inside the cell, every point inside this cell, it has roughly the same distance to this point, roughly the same distance to this point. That is, 2 points inside the same cell. The ratio of distances to the blue point is differ by 1 plus epsilon at most. The same goes with our distance to this point. And if you have more data points and more disks, even better. Doesn't matter. Every cell in this arrangement of disks will do the job for you. And now you only need to grow a system of disks all at the same time. Put all of them in a disk, put all of them on a grid, that is, unify them to cover all of them by discretizing it on a grid. The disks are static. I just wanted you to see how it's pixelized. And these cells I can store in the hash tables that I had earlier. And now, given a query point, I can ask, is there any disk whose distance from me is R or not? I don't know what is the nearest neighbor, but I know if there is a disk there whose distance from me is R, or there is no disk whose distance from my query point is R, and then my cell is green, is not red. Now, if we also said that we only need log n or constant, depending on the spread, many different sizes of disks that are metals, all going in the same point. So now I'll check for my query point, is it inside the, is there any disk that cover it here? Is there any disk that cover it here? Any disk that cover it here? And once I hit any disk that cover it, that's my approximated nearest neighbor. That was one way to do it. Don't forget the WSPD. That we are running out of time, but we didn't speak much about it. I said it's like this, you can do it. I showed you the code, but we didn't discuss it much. It's very easy from a quad tree to report what is a WSPD, but do remember the notion of what do I actually need to tell you about the WSPD. I need to show you a quad tree, and in the quad tree, all I'll show you is a set of pairs of nodes, with the important properties that every pair that I'll tell you about, these nodes are, the region of these nodes are small and they are far away from each other. They are small comparing to their distance between themselves, and that would be WSPD. And then a lot of beautiful things like finding the spanner of all these nodes, just connect all these buckets. Or actually the WSPD, I didn't tell you when I told you about it. Originally WSPD, this whole notion came from actually solving, do they have a good picture? This all comes from solving gravity between, multi-body gravity project. How does this set of objects behave with respect to this set of objects? Well, I would like, when I think about the impact about this set of objects, all the effect of all these ones, I don't want to think about them as individual. I want to cluster them into one single point. Is this legit or not legit? Yes, if they are far away enough from this part. So to solve multi-body or motion problem with gravity, like between astronomical altitude, this WSPD is very, very, very useful. What else do we have? We have point location in trapezoidal map. The algorithm was a bit, was used again, placing random order, and we had the, and I can go over it, I can stay another, but sounds that you are done. And we will have a review if you want. I mean, I'm not being paid for it, but I don't mind like a day or two, like 5, 6 at the evening if it saves for you, or if you want other time, and I'll be available before that. So yeah, take a look at the slides. I'll add the motion planning. You have a link from the course website to this big set of slides. And yeah, that's, not everything was smooth. I tried to introduce stuff that I thought that is very important, which breaks the natural order of the course. I think the material is extremely cool. I hope that I didn't destroy too much by various teaching mistakes. I hope that you relatively enjoyed it as much as you can enjoy courses. Yeah, and it's practical stuff mostly. It's elegantly tasty. I don't know, I like it. Hope that you did too.